Are you a dog lover? Then one of the biggest questions you must have is, what's going on in my dog's mind? Join us as Chirag Patel, one of the world's biggest dog trainers and animal behaviorists, explains to us just a little glimpse. Welcome to the Genius Dog Challenge, the interview series. Hi, and I'm super excited to introduce today's guest, Chirag Patel. Hi, Chirag. Thank you for being with us.
Hi, how are you?
Good. My name is Shanit Rohr. I'm a researcher at the Family Dog Project. And what we're trying to do in today's interview series is to try and close a bit the gap between dog science and actual dog training. And I think Chirag is probably the best person to help us with this because his experience is like, you name it, he's done it. Zoos, aquariums, dogs, literally all over the world. So, and that's why I'm so excited to have you with us. So, Chirag, one of the first questions I have for you, and it's a bit of a weird one. I didn't have any dogs. I was not allowed to have dogs when I was growing up. So I had rabbits, and I was training rabbits instead. And I know that you did grow up with dogs. And I also know that you did chicken training camps. Mm-hmm. Why would someone that has access to dogs go and train chickens?
Well, so dogs were part of our family in terms of working animals. So in our culture, we had German Shepherds in our family from a young age, and they used to be guard dogs for the family business. And then I went to San Francisco to do an internship with Gene Donaldson and Ian Dunbar. And there I found out about Bob Bailey and his chicken workshops. And initially I was like, why are you training chickens? And we also had birds at home, by the way, like parrots and cockatiels. And so I was like, why are we training chickens? And someone explained to me going, well, training chickens is nothing really about the chicken training per se. It's more about the skills that you learn. And you learn to use the science of behavior change, behavior analysis, operant conditioning, and how it can be used with different species, regardless of the species. It applies to all behavior. And so that really helped me learn about behavior as a science and its application, as opposed to just training a specific species.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think from all the things that you have, because you started your way with dogs, so what do you think is one of the big tools that you maybe took from training dogs into working with other species?
I think working with dogs allowed me to have a slightly different perspective, because we talk about operant conditioning, behavior analysis, and its application. There's a science and an art, and you see how people apply it in many different ways, and how they've taken the science and used it in many different ways to achieve many different results, and even sometimes making it more ethical in its application. And I think dog trainers are way ahead in one way because of the number of conferences they go to. They're living with these animals 24/7, and so a lot of times when they're working with them, the discussions that are going on, the investment that's happening, the questions they're asking, I think if you go into just like a zoo world, I think you sometimes see things applied slightly differently. And so coming from the dog perspective gave me that. And I think with dogs, they have to be so adaptable because they're living in so many different situations with us in our homes. We have different visitors, noises, sights, sounds, smells, everything's changing. And when we're working with a wild animal living under human care, say in a zoo or an aquarium, you still have things change, but the animals aren't necessarily leaving their enclosure a lot of the times. And so I think with dogs, you sometimes you learn skills that you wouldn't do with some of the other animals that we work with, but vice versa too.
Mm-hmm. And do you think, like, for me, when I started working with pigs 2 years ago, and there was a moment when I was like trying to point to something and the pig wasn't paying any attention. And that was for me the moment that I kind of understood there's something really special going on with the dogs that we're working with. So have you experienced anything like this, like any big gaps that you were expecting an animal to work like this, I don't know, because of the previous animal maybe you worked with, and now suddenly it's working differently? It's reacting differently?
Definitely. I think I've seen that many times throughout my career when I've gone and worked with a different species, or I do something and someone questions me, or like you say, you point and it doesn't work. You point and the animal just stares and looks at you. Because with our dogs, maybe inadvertently or on purpose, we've taught them to follow a point, to understand that there's certain outcomes when they respond in certain ways when certain cues are available. And that same learning hasn't happened when you turn up and you're working with a tiger or a lion or a bear, and suddenly you start going, hold on a second, rather than just taking for granted things that I do just out of habit, let me start questioning everything that I'm doing. And actually, I think you start becoming more honest as a trainer, rather than just kind of going, this is what I do because that's my habit, that's what I do all the time. You have to start becoming more present. You have to start becoming more observant, more objective. And I think that makes a really good trainer.
I completely agree. For me, when I switch to a new species, that's the biggest challenge, to try and change the point of view. And this is why in this, like, I introduced this video as going into your dog's mind, because I think, when you work with a different species, like you went and trained chickens, you get a new perspective, which is also super important when you're working with dogs, because of course each dog is an individual, and we kind of tend to treat them all as dogs, but no, each dog is different.
And I think you've hit a good point there. And I think a lot of times when we see animals, we don't see the animal or the behavior in front of us. What we see often is the labels and the constructs and the stories and the cultural fog that has been created around, in terms of just from our upbringing, our early learning, our society, all of those different things. And so often when we turn up, we look at it and go, well, this is a Rottweiler, but we're not looking at the dog in front of us. What we're looking at is our history of learning relevant to what we've labeled under Rottweilers, and that also has certain emotions and feelings that have been present based on certain contingencies of learning that are going on with those animals. And so we bring all of that to the table, and that's normal. We're human beings, that's gonna happen. But I think it's trying to stop and take a step back and go, hold on a second, this Rottweiler is different to the Rottweilers I've worked with previously, because maybe there's differences genetically, there's differences early socialization, upbringing, how much sleep, the kind of diet, the biochemical makeup of that learner. So the environment in many different ways, internal and external, is very different based on each individual we're working with. And so I think it's so important. For me, that's one of my big passions, is I don't turn up to a table going, this is a dolphin, or this is a beluga whale. Based on all the other animals that I've worked with, I turn up saying, okay, what can I learn about this individual in front of me today? Because the amount of sleep that this dolphin has is different to maybe the dolphin I worked with last week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think in some sense, we should also do that every time that we're trying to work with our dogs, right? Because yes, maybe I've trained my dog to sit here in the street, but that was yesterday, and today there's a huge truck coming by. So there's one thing that you said that I really related to, about how dogs have all this emotional background. And I have to say, when I was working with rabbits, my rabbit didn't have any emotional background. They just wanted its carrot now. And I was wondering if you've also experienced this, that in some sense, when you're working with other animals, because dogs have a lot of issues with the relationship they have with us and stuff like that. So maybe when you were working with other animals, did you often find an animal which was like, all business, no, just do what I need to get the food?
Definitely. So I think when you're working with different animals and different individuals, you see different behaviors. So you have certain behaviors you might describe as, okay, this animal, the motivation for acquiring food is way higher, and that's the primary focus here. So you don't see other things. But also, I think there's so many other variables that we have to look at, because if I'm working with my dog, there's so much learning history, there's so much body language and behaviors that I've labeled in certain ways that become meaningful in certain situations. So when I go go to another animal, another species, maybe that I haven't had that same reinforcement history in reading their behaviors, seeing the small changes, I may not pick up on them. So my interpretation might be that this animal is a bit more cold or less emotional. But actually, am I able to see or learn more about the nuances of their behaviors and their body language, everything from snakes to insects to fish? You start going, actually, a lot of these animals that we work with, I think many of them have a rich emotional life. And sometimes we just got to learn to see that. And I think because we don't practice it or we're not familiar with the species, we don't often see it.
Definitely. And so it takes, for me, every time I start working with a new species, it's like learning from all over again, because you need to like learn their body language and how they communicate with each other and all of that. And I guess, maybe these are the things that we are kind of taking for granted when we're working with dogs. Is there anything specific that you feel like people are not appreciating in their dogs?
I would say with dogs, what I think how we might be letting them down is actually we're talking about emotions and we're talking about feelings, and I think these are all things that are genuinely worth talking about and discussing. And we know that they have the biology to experience a variety of different feelings and have a rich sort of emotional system. However, I think that can also be getting us into trouble, and also maybe holding our dogs back, because one of the things I've really seen is with dogs, we use so many labels and we really go inside the dog's mind and put in stories and create stories that may not be there, and then it changes the way we look at that behavior, or we behave ourselves, and certain self-fulfilling prophecies come true. Whereas sometimes with the wild animal work, or when I'm working with different species, you get less of the sort of anthropomorphism, and also they still care about the animal's well-being and emotions. But I think sometimes you look at it and go, okay, so this polar bear, okay, we think this polar bear could be feeling fearful or scared. Okay, what are the environment situations that we want to work on changing? What are the behaviors that we want to teach? And by doing those, the polar bear is also hopefully going to change the way the polar bear feels. But I think with dogs, sometimes what we do is we label them and go, this dog is traumatized, this dog is really fearful, this dog is aggressive or impulsive, and then that dog lives the label for so many years. And a lot of times people go, oh, it takes time to change behavior because a dog was poorly socialized. It's going to take years for us to make a change. However, when I look at some of the wild animal work we've done, we can take animals who are wild animals. So you would think, okay, if dogs are domesticated, then potentially it's going to be easier for them to integrate into human lives and to change their behavior living with people. So you take a wild animal who hasn't had that same socialization and the interaction, and the animal's maybe hiding under a bale of straw. You've got a young tiger or a jaguar hiding under some straw, and they're just learning about people. And this is a wild animal who's past that early socialization phase. And within months, you can have them come into the fence purring while you do a voluntary injection or a blood check, or take blood or do something. Whereas I think sometimes with dogs, we see them 2 years, 3 years, 9 years later, and people are like, oh, he just wasn't socialized. Oh, he's just traumatized. And I think with dogs, we're letting them down because sometimes we're losing our objectivity in the way we look at their behavior. And I just think we're not doing the best we could in terms of helping them have the best and rich lives as possible. Sometimes we're wrapping too much bubble wrap, and that bubble wrap is sometimes labels and things that if we tear away, we might actually be able to really empower our dogs' lives even more.
So I think maybe for some of us, because they're so close to us, we're kind of treating our dogs maybe a bit more as we would treat a best friend, human best friend, and maybe possibly not as much as they would want to be treated as animals, as dogs, I mean, not animals, but as a different species. I know you've mentioned your work in training animals for veterinary assistants in aquariums and zoos. I know you also do a lot of enrichment. And maybe this is something that's very important for people, especially in these times, to kind of have an idea of how to enrich their dog's life on a day-to-day. So do you have any tips for this?
Definitely. I think enrichment is very important. And for me, it's not something we do as an added extra or if I have time, it's something that should be integrated into any care program that we have for an animal. And so for me, when I look at my dog or a cat or a parrot, any animal, I look at, okay, so what kind of sensory inputs can that animal, is the animal open to? So their biology, what kind of sensory inputs does their biology allow? So it could be pheromones, it could be different other sense of smells, it could be a visual, it could be tactile, touch, it could be. So you look at all of these, you go hearing, audible, and so you go, okay, so these are different kind of things that could provide sensory information, enrichment, provide things for the animal to do, explore. And then I tend to do a little table or a little flowchart and go, okay, so what is it that I want my enrichment to, what's the goal of my enrichment? So I might go, okay, my goal is I want to increase the amount, the opportunity my dog has to use his nose. And that way allows me to go, okay, how am I going to pick? What enrichment am I going to pick? Or what am I going to design? So it could be, rather than putting the food into a bowl, I scatter it along the grass. But one of the things I would advise people to do is maybe ask the question, what am I trying to achieve by using this piece of enrichment? And that way we start to look at and go, if you keep a little table or a little chart, you can go, oh, I do a lot of enrichment that involves nose, but I don't maybe do enough enrichment or give my dog opportunities that allow them to use other senses or tactile or other things. And so that way we can start to really be more objective in the way we enrich environments.
Cool. And I think this is also where, our the individual character of our dogs kicks in, because this is like for a dog that is super oriented for smell, maybe we would want to change a bit. Or for example, for a dog that doesn't care at all about smells,
Yeah, and in times like this where maybe we're not seeing, so if your dogs are used to meeting lots of other dogs or smelling other dogs and they're not getting to do so much of that, maybe you might be able to do odor transfers. So you could, if smelling other dogs is really enriching, but you're staying indoors a lot more now, if you have people who have other dogs, you could maybe ask them when they're grooming their dog to collect some of the leftover fur, or maybe just take a towel and place it in their dog's bed for a week and then post it to you, or collect it from to you, so that you can place it in the room that your dog sleeps in. Now, if you can do it with cats and other animals too, but I would just recommend, just make sure when you do bring in a different odor, because with cats they can be really sensitive to the smell of a new cat within their territorial environment. That could be upsetting for them. So make sure it's not a stressful situation. Even for a dog, if you've got a dog who doesn't necessarily like other dogs and they suddenly start smelling a strange dog in the house, that might be more stressful than entertaining. So just make sure when we do these things, we do them in a way that we're not making their safe places unsafe, but they're becoming entertaining.
Cool. And now I finally know what to do with all the fur I have. So people, if you need like an enrichment from an old German Shepherd, I have a bunch of it. I can finally send it away. I can create more dogs.
You could actually make little bits of fur, make little baby German Shepherds out of it.
Yeah. Chirag, thank you so much for all this amazing information. And if you're watching us on the Genius Dog Challenge YouTube channel, go check Domesticated Manners. That's Chirag's YouTube channel. Lots of super good tips about how to train your dogs and just taking a bit of a different perspective. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it a lot.
Cool. And to all of you at home, as Chirag mentioned, something about Ian Dunbar. Dr. Ian Dunbar is going to be with us next week on the live. So check that out. Also, tomorrow, our finals of the Genius Dog Challenge. So make sure to click the subscribe button so you don't miss out on tomorrow's last episode. See you tomorrow. Bye.